The first yellow leaves. I saw some more, but those trees just looked sick. Maybe this one is too, but I'm assuming that it's the natural path to autumn. Yes. Woo! One of the most beautiful things in this game. And there's the most beautiful thing of them all. Also yellow. What's with the color? What a great way to wake up. The moon and... what is there? Oh, what a beauty. I got this title idea for the video because I made this mix once called Don't Stare at the Sun, It Might Be Fun, about 4 years ago. So it tells you what kind of state I was in back then. Thanks to Dave for introducing me to Sungazing. Although I was always attracted to the sunset, not so much the sunrise, because I always associated with my childhood and how I went to the kindergarten that I couldn't stand it. So I once saw the sunrise when I was 3 or 4, but I can still remember it quite clearly. Now I've gotten rid of that. It was an unnatural illusion. Now I can appreciate it for what it is, naturally. But that's exactly my point. Sun gazing, solar gazing, or whatever you want to call it, is not some hidden practice. It's actually more or less the opposite, because when you look back at how everything began, there's the sun. We perceive it as being in the sky, and it gives us warmth and all that stuff. And when it rises, when it sets, the color changes, and that is very attractive. It's the most beautiful thing in the world. In nature. So people always sun gazed. It's not what it's made out to be. And people like HRM, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and read a lot about the sun, a lot, and most people mention him and talk about what they do and explain how they follow his rules, and those are rules, and they do something that is so natural, not realizing that they're doing it completely unnaturally. Firstly, using a timer, following these man-made symbols, and then also even limiting themselves as to how much they should do, not following their own instinct. And he actually even sets a limit to 45 minutes that you shouldn't do more, whereas I sun gaze at any time of the day. And many people do when you look into it, and there's no damage that happens. If anything, it's the opposite of damage. So it's quite clearly distraction. It's a limitation. A lot of stuff he teaches people is very suspicious. Almost everything is controlled, and sun gazing is no exception. So the way they control it is to limit the people that way. This looks a bit funny. Imagine how our skies would look like without all of this. I'll make more videos on this subject. This is more like an introduction to it all. And I'm not recommending to stare at the sun yet, at least. And I'll tell you why, because I wrote down everything that happened since I started it, and it's not convincing enough for me to go ahead and tell it to the viewers, because a few people do watch my videos, and watching the sunrise and sunset in general, of course, is always recommended. But that's needless to say. Another thing about the HRM, this info guy, is that he says that it should be done 1 hour before the sunset or 1 hour after sunrise. In between that time in nature the sun is golden around that time and even way after the 1 hour man-made period. So in nature one would be attracted to it way after it, and there's always radiation, except that radiation is not what we've been made to believe. We associate it with something completely else. In nature one would see it as being strong or less strong, but there's always something there. Something is radiating from the sun. Energy is flowing always. It's all nonsense. So I did it for the first time 2014 a few times in January, so 7-8 months ago, but only 3 or 4 times to test it. A few seconds. I did the 10 seconds, but I never timed it approximately, just to test it, and then I did it how I felt like. Did something like 10, then took a break, then 10 again, and then and so on. Just tested a lot of things and realized that I'm not going to follow this slow process, because that's another trap. It takes really long to get anywhere, and here where I live, in the capital of chemtrails, it's close to impossible to actually do it that way, because when the sun is very low, it's always, and by always I mean 90% of the time at least, is going to be blocked by a lot of chem bombs, chemtrails, chem clouds, and now and then some natural clouds. Okay, so officially I started in February, 1st of February, and I stopped using my contact lenses. They ran out right then, so that was the perfect timing, so to say. I wanted to see if anything will change with my vision, and I can say right now that it did get sharper. Whether it was because my eyes adjusted to it or because it was of the sun, I couldn't possibly tell. I'm assuming it's both. Because when you use glasses or contact lenses or such, your eyes get used to it and they don't work properly themselves, the muscles or whatever that is. My plan was to increase the time before the sunset by 5 minutes every month, so if I sungazed 15 minutes 1 month, I could sungaze the whole 20 minutes the next month. I had this very vivid dream, if that's what it's called, in February, when I was in Latvia and I went outside and there was a huge golden sun, and then I woke up and the sun was rising, which is an illusion, but that's how we perceive it, that it rises right at the time, so there was no coincidence. I gazed 1 hour before sunset for close to a minute, and I got a spot in my eyes for 2 days, a bright spot of the sun, and disappeared. So if you want to do it, it's definitely best to start low, at the lowest point. That should be obvious when it doesn't appear to be so strong. At the end of March, I sungazed for 20 minutes on a hill and got a spot in the middle of my eyes again, in the middle of my vision, how I perceive it. And a few days later, something called a floater appeared. And I'm not going to explain what that is, but if you look into it, it's very common to get floaters and all kinds of lights and such in your eyes, and they can last indefinitely. So that's another reason why I don't recommend it, because at first, at least for now, because that's something you'll just have to accept as a possibility, that you may get all kinds of things in your eyes, because that's just how some eyes work and some don't. But I've read a lot of stories about it, and it is very common to get floaters and similar things. However, some have actually healed their floaters from it. So and this spot never went away. It's only visible in sunlight, from what I've noticed. It's something in between the eye, and it's microscopic. It just appears to be there. Sort of comparable to tinnitus. I haven't noticed it since I got it for months or years, because it's simply always there, and that's the same thing. If you don't pay attention to it, you will never care about it. I definitely don't. And since then, after those 2 months, at the start of April, I decided to not follow this 5-minute thing approximately, although I never had it actually planned out, because I hardly ever plan anything, but I started looking all around the sun, which is what a lot of people recommend, and from what I noticed, the benefits are the same. So if this is the sun, I would look here, 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 all around it, or even further away, and so on. Just however you like, but not directly at it, because that's my experience with it. So in May there was this golden sun right after rain, and because there's so many chemicals in the sky here, in the air I should say, after the rain the sunset is always much clearer. Generally everything is just much clearer. You can sense it in every way. And after that I ate about 30% less. That's when I started noticing those benefits that everybody always talks about. Also in May I started seeing a rainbow around the sun, which wasn't a chembo. I do understand the difference, but it was in the sun set and was green, yellow, red. Never saw it after. It was quite an experience. Then I also started randomly singing a song, no clue what that was. It was a repeating thing. I was in the moment. If that's a real language or not, I have no clue. It was like a chanting. At the end of May, some people were where I was sungazing at my spot, and they were blinded by the sun. There was only 20 to 30 minutes before sunset, and they were looking at me and pointing how I'm not blinded by it, and that's when I realized that I've gotten somewhere. Because at that time I was already sungazing 1 hour before the sunset. And my fingernails turned very pink. Maybe I never realized that they were, but I'm very sure that they turned pink. June, started sleeping less, 7 to 8 hours, which is huge for me. That's what I wrote, and it is, because I'm somebody who slept for usually 11 hours for I have no clue how long now, but probably a year at least. Sometimes even 12 hours, sometimes of course a bit less, but I was always quite tired. Possibly it was because I was oversleeping, but at the same time it didn't feel like oversleeping because I was really that tired that I could sleep so long. I woke up in between but then fell asleep again and again and again, and had a lot of lucid dreams. I was lucid dreaming quite often, let's just say. Many times, many days in a row. So I was always quite a dreamer. But I started sleeping less, but still had those lucid dreams, and quite often in control of my dreams and doing whatever I want. In July, hunger was gone more than before. It says I slept 5 hours here, that's what I wrote, but I can't remember that. I do remember waking up at 4 a.m., which would be 6 hours for me, which was unbelievable in comparison to everything, how I have slept. Those 11 hours, even sleeping 9 hours for me would be just a miracle. So that was definitely very huge for me to wake up this early and just not feel tired. And I woke up perfectly for a sunrise starting June and July, because it was at 5 a.m. At the end of July, when I came back from Latvia, and then my vision wasn't as sharp anymore because there's hardly any sun here for a week, and after that, when I started sungazing again, it got sharper, which means that the sun has definitely something to do with making the vision sharper, and many people have reported this. 12th of August, which is not long ago now, it's the end of August now, I saw two suns. It was one and the other was coming out. Not sure what that was. It was a glitch in my eyes or something, but that's what I saw. 13th of August, the back of the head was numb. That's sometime when I started sungazing at noon. And also my vision got very strange for about 10 seconds, but my eyes were watery, teary, because it was quite hot. It was not comfortable, so I just washed my eyes with water and it was okay. So quite sure it was simply the water in my eyes. 14th of August, I spontaneously decided to fast for the first time in my life, because I've always eaten for 36 hours just to test it, and it was quite fine. It was the morning where the sun was perfectly going across the tree line, and I was just laying at a tree, and it just felt right to do it. And I was and still am sometimes using this sun-gazing mask where I cut out the eyes, because me coming from the north, sun-gazing at noon is fine for my eyes so far, but for my skin of course not, because the sunburns that I get are very severe. So then I simply get red around here, which is look kind of funny. You can also put some coconut oil or something around your face, of course. And that day when I was fasting, the sun appeared very white, almost like an angel, which is what I've been conditioned to believe, that that's how an angel looks like. This bright light. But actually, after that, in the middle of my vision, I had a image, spot in my eye which looked like an angel, which is how I have been conditioned to see angels, because I've never seen one, but that's how it actually was. I believe it's a coincidence, but and while walking around, my boots looked green, partly, which was also some kind of lights in my eyes, I believe, when I looked down. So that's all I wrote down so far. And I've gotten since April a lot of more floaters in my eyes, which are mostly those microscopic dots, which appear to be larger, but just also a lot of lines and such, which are definitely from Sungazing. But seeing as it doesn't bother me yet, I'm not complaining. After a few months, I realized that while absorbing and observing the rays of the sun, that pretty much everything that we see, all those symbols that are supposed to have some secret hidden meaning, which is supposed to make life much more interesting, is actually based off simple nature. And if you haven't sun gazed, the sun rays, when looking down, many people call it the light sword of light that goes into your eyes, and it's like this and this, it's Jesus. But what it means is that not that Jesus is the sun or the sun is Jesus, that simply people wrote long time ago a story about the sun, which was Jesus. Lucifer, all of it is the same thing. All the Egyptian symbols are all simply based on the sun and its rays. That symbol with the wings is simply the sun rays. And the story is basically because people didn't assume that the sun is God, but it's the son of God. The cross and Jesus being in the middle, it's simply that it's there in the sky and it's crucified, so to say, and it's staying there. And It was in the earth symbolically because, as it's shown always, because it's always there, and it is actually the thing that is keeping this illusion alive, in a sense. If you think about light, and without it we wouldn't be able to experience and sense anything. So when looking at the sun, you're more or less looking at the illusion of it, and one could think that while looking at what keeps the illusion alive, you may start to understand the illusion much clearer. The horses are running wild, the birds are singing, insects flying around. All of it for the sun. This color. It's nature.